So I'm about to begin 1,000 point of the ninth edition, and I chose two war bands for this. We've got Skaven over, or I'm sorry, the Knights of Bretonnia. It used to be. I'm not sure. The Esquitain army, I guess is what they're calling it now. I took some archers right here. I took a damsel. I took a paladin and some Knights of the Realm. And I'm going to probably use the Game Workshop terms until I get used to the 9th edition terms. So I'll be back and forth between. Now this is a new war machine. I don't remember off the top of my head what it's called, but it's basically, it's not a catapult. It's one of the, or it is a catapult. I'm sorry. It's not a. It's not I forget the name of it now. Can't think. So that's 500 points. Not a very big army. Over here we have the Doom Wheel. Now, you used to not be able to take a Doom Wheel with the amount of points that this army was, so that should be interesting to see how it performs and how they've changed it. Same thing with basically the wizard, the wizard rat. Over here I've got some slaves and some regular clan rats. So we'll see how this goes. Terrain wise, I got a river. This is our river table. Over here I have a forest. 1, 2, 3, 4 forests, a building, and 2 fields. Now I've never had fields before, so I had to go to Home Depot and grab me some fields. And this is our river table. The river that it uses is an actual running river. It's pretty cool, if I do say so myself. And if you look up there, it's almost like there's a little melting glacier going into the pond. Runs all the way down into the swamp down there. And that's our terrain. We have a hill over here. This is an official hill. So, by the way, this table's for sale. It has a pump down underneath there that you just plug in. The pool table part is not for sale, so it's not really a table. I would say this terrain piece with a real running river is for sale. Okay, so I chose counter thrust as the game type, which means, and is the secondary objective. It is the thing with the center in the middle, hold your ground. I'm not exactly sure how that works yet. I know that with counter thrust, you draw a line to the center. You both fight on either edge, and you can deploy within 6 inches from that center line, but all your units have to be at least 18 inches away from the opponents, and you can only deploy 1 unit at a time. So we'll see how that works out. So the Bretonnians got to choose who deploys on which side. The Bretonnians will deploy on this side because there's less forests. They have those knights. My damsel, she rolled for spells and got chilling wind, but that just gives a -1 on the 2 wound, which might be useful against that Doom Wheel. But I'm more worried about getting bogged down by the slaves, so I chose the one that gives me +1 strength and +1 toughness if I cast the harder version of the spell. So for the Skaven, my spell is Thermology, and we basically have Comet of Casadora, which is one of the ones he spelled. We have another one that's a magic missile, and the third one is a weird spell where you both roll a d6, and whatever the difference between you and your opponent's rolls is the number of wounds that your opponent takes. So, Skaven magic. Okay, so the Skaven chose the Bretonnians to deploy first, and I can only deploy 1 unit at a time, so I put my Scorpion on the hill in hopes that I'll be able to see most of the battlefield except for that building, which apparently is obscuring terrain, which means I cannot see through it. However, being on the hill gives me gigantic size for line of sight purposes. So I basically should be able to see everything else fairly easily. And I want to probably deploy some knights in that area, depending on what happens, because it's wide open, and I don't want to take any dangerous terrain tests if I can avoid it. Okay, so the Skaven deployed their dread mill, which is now what that unit is called. I decided to deploy it over there with hopes of charging across. So we're all going to have to go across that river, so I'll just take the hit. You'll also notice I added a 75mm base to represent that model. I'm going to probably have to get a modified elves crossbow model to make it look like a scorpion. So I placed my Bretonnian archers in that field. I placed my Skaven slaves over here, which is actually what I should have done with the doom wheel, because I didn't realize that I can actually cross this river right here and still be within my deployment zone. So the plan is to put the Skaven slaves there so that they don't have to take dangerous terrain checks through that river, or that they can still march and move or whatever they need to do. Oh, and I also wanted to mention one odd thing about the 9th edition, and that is that they don't really have any rules for buildings in terms of occupying a building. So they basically right now say you can't. I've heard rumors from the rules guys, the official rules guys, that there's probably going to be rules for that later on. I hope they get that soon. I deployed my Bretonnians a little bit different because I wanted to block off the Skaven's ability to deploy any more across the river, which forced me to deploy the clan rats right there, so they're still in the river. Which, another interesting thing about the 9th edition is they don't say river, they just say water. So this pond here, and there's another one up there on the hill there, don't have any different special rules. I guess everyone in Warhammer or in the 9th Age can swim, which sort of makes sense. I guess rats could swim. But there you go. I guess they can move across water. They just suffer penalties no matter how large the body is. Adding the paladin to the knights unit, I added the magister to the clan rats, and I added the damsel to the archers over there. Interesting thing is that the damsel normally can be put in the not the front rank, but she has to be mounted in order to do that. And also interesting that the wizard has a rule called honorless, which means he can refuse a challenge, the magistrate, but without any penalty. We rolled to see who goes first, and the Skaven get to go first, the Bretonnians have to go first, which is actually bad because their blessing doesn't work until the second round, but we'll see how it goes. It's a good day for the Bretonnians, my friends. Look at that roll, Duck. That's what I'm talking about. Charge roll. Now, an interesting thing about the charge roll is if you have barding, it says that you have -1 to movement. However, it doesn't say that it affects your movement characteristic, which is what the charge rule says you use to determine the distance you charged. So that might have to be factored out. So in other words, these Bretonnians with their warhorses without barding have their movement characteristic is 9. However, their movement should only be 8 because of barding, but that's their movement, not their movement characteristic. Therefore, in a charge that uses movement characteristic, you should be able to use the full 9, according to the rules. And just so you know, I'm a bit of a rule lawyer. I believe that strategy is made up of rules and taking advantage where you can. And, well, if you have a problem with that, then you're a pussy and shouldn't play with me. That's what strategy is all about. So rolling for magic is basically the same. One thing that's different is channeling, which happens after you roll the winds, just like before. Or they call it magic flux in this game. For each wizard you get a +1 to the single channel opportunity that you have. So in this game, both the Bretonnians and the Skaven only have, or the Ratmen only have, and the Equitraine only have, both of them only have one wizard, so it's basically the same. And neither one of them channeled. I rolled a 4 and a 3, so we got 7 for the channeling, or 7 magic dice and 4 for the Skaven. My damsel attempted to cast Awaken the Beast. She only rolled that right there, and then the Skavens rolled, I think I totaled 17, because he's a wizard master, which means he's +3 to his dispel dice, and she's just an apprentice. So that's the end of the Bretonnian magic phase. So the Bretonnians can now take crossbows, which is pretty cool. They are unwieldy. They have a range of 30, so I'm within range. And unwieldy means that they take an additional -1 modifier if they move at all, which they didn't, so it doesn't matter. But I had to get, I have a -1 modifier for range, and I had, and their weapon skill, or their ballistic skill is only 3, so I needed 5 ups, and 6 ups for this last one because he has, the Skaven have soft cover from him because of this forest. And guess what? I didn't roll anything, so that's the end of, that's the end of the first part of the Bretonnian shooting phase. The Bretonnians shot their Scorpion, which is a bolt thrower, which in this game means each rank basically gets hit by, one gets hit by the highest strength, which in this case is 6, and the rest get hit by, and it has 5 files, 4, because we hit him on the side. So 4 other hits. Now I only successfully at the toughness 3 of the Ratmen only got 3 hits off. I need to check on parry. Now the interesting thing about bolt thrower is, aside from saying it's penetrating, it doesn't really tell you how it shoots. So I just assumed, using the other old rules, that it shoots just like a giant crossbow basically. So I used the ballistic skill of the quote-unquote bowman there. I think that they should clarify that in the rules. We shouldn't have to rely on our old memory of other rules, so hopefully they'll get that done. I looked up the rules on parrying, and parrying doesn't apply in anything but close combat, but I'll just, since we're about to hit close combat, I'll tell you about it anyway. First, you have to have a hand weapon, you have to have a shield. Then basically you can't hit anyone on anything greater than a 4+, so that should be interesting. One interesting tidbit I just learned is that slaves cannot have shields. They can only take a musician, and that's about it for their options. So my paladin, he has the highest initiative, but he has a two-handed weapon, or I'm not a two-handed weapon, he has a great weapon which attacks at initiative 0, so that cancels out his ability to go first. Now, an interesting new rule is that they have, all these knights have a rule called Thunderous Charge, which means they get +1 on the first round of combat if they charged in combat, which they did. Now, normally they got +2 for having lances in the old rules. Now they just get +1 for the lances, but it still ends up being the same thing. They still go to +2 to strength when they charge into combat. So the slaves have an initiative of 4, which is higher than the regular knights and their horses, so they get to attack. Now 2 of them are in base contact with my paladin, and guess what? They both roll 5, so they hit. But strength 3 against toughness 4 on my paladin, and that 1 and 2 is just not going to do it, so nothing happens to the paladin. 2 more Skaven slaves hit the knights, but they only roll a 2 and a 1 on their strength versus toughness, which they needed a 4 up, so that's the end of the attacks for the slaves. Now the next initiative are the horses and the knights. So an interesting new rule is that champions basically don't have their own profile like they used to. They just get a +1 attack, and they have their own wound pool, which I guess must affect some rules, but mostly they just get a +1 attack. By the way, I like this rule, the champion get +1 attack rule, because the truth is excuse me, that's basically what they got before anyway. Now, one thing I'm worried about with the new 9th edition is it does streamline a lot of things, but I wonder if it does it at the cost of making very interesting and unique armies, and the very fluffy armies. Like, for instance, yeah, sure, most of the time a champion, all it did was give a model a +1 attack anyway, but there were some exceptions to that, and so, I mean, I wonder if it's destroying the variety that the old Warhammer had, but I guess we'll find out. So I just read another interesting thing about the Knights of the Realm now. One is that they can exchange their shields for a flail, but that also means they still have a lance. And they have the jousting special rule, which means that they can attack with their lance during the first round of combat, which is now, and then they can switch over to their flail during the other rounds of combat. I really like this rule. It allows the knights to be much more dynamic. Usually one of the problems with the Bretonnians, or in this case the Equitraine, was that they were really good at the first round of combat, and after that they were really not very good. It was hard for them to hit anything. So this might change that up a little bit. I wanted to point out also that I lied. The lances actually give a +2 strength. So unless I figured it wrong, those lances are hitting in a strength 7, which is amazing because for impetuous charge you get a strength +1. For the lance you get strength +2. Plus the Knights of the Realm have a 4 strength, which I think is new as well. So that should be, strength 4, strength 5 for impetuous charge, strength 6, 7 for their lances. So I guess that's strength 8. So yeah, that's pretty powerful. I like that because I love the Bretonnians. I also wanted to point out that the rules use the word, and I found this out because I searched for lance, and balanced has lance in it. Where are you going to find in any of the Games Workshop fantasy books anything that talks about having a balanced play experience? So that's a +1 for the ninth age. They try to go for balance. That's great. A quick side note on this battle report is I'm going to go into a lot more detail, and that's because I want to sort of explain the differences between the rules between old Warhammer, the 8th edition fantasy, and the 9th age. Normally I won't do that. I wouldn't say I go into enough detail to make this a tutorial, because all I'm really doing is pointing out differences, but I'll make frequent stops and I will talk about the different rule changes as best I can according to my memory. It has been a while since I played Warhammer Fantasy, so it's probably been roughly about a year. When I say I should say 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy. Okay, so at the end of allocating wounds and attacks, the Skaven slaves predictably didn't do so well. Look at that duck. Look at all them slaves and dead slaves. Just like the good old days. I'm going to have to look up how the new strength and numbers rules work, because I think they're a little bit different, but I should be well within my leadership bubble of my wizard there, and we'll get back to it. One of the new rules in charging on the flank that's interesting is you can actually get +2 combat advantage for charging on a flank if you have 2 or more ranks, I believe, if I remember the rule correctly. I don't. For some reason I decided not to do the knight formation. I should have, because I could have easily had a rank there. I have 6 knights on the board, and I think I can do it in a combat reform now. If I win, of course I won. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out, that the flank now gives you some extra stuff. So over here I'm starting to tally my combat. 1 for charging, 1 for the flank attack, 1 for having a banner, and I have to think about that one. Okay, so the Skaven slaves stick. Of course they do. That's what they do best. They're a tar pit. Basically, Inspiring Presence works the same, easily within 12 inches. His leadership is, the Magister's leadership is 6, and we have, I did that wrong. Doesn't matter. Just 2 ranks. I counted as 3 ranks, but apparently that's only 2 ranks, so I'm already biting into their leadership. I need to look up whether the first rank counts, or if it's 2 additional ranks. Anyway, but it doesn't matter because the Skaven on their leadership rolled just short of insane courage anyway. So they stay. They have steadfast because they have more ranks than me, and safety in numbers, which used to be strength in numbers, is basically the same rule. So that's the end of the first round ever of the 9th edition close combat. I still have to do combat reforms, which I'll probably do, and then we'll get on with it.
So both units combat reformed. I went into the Knights unit so I can get that extra rank next time, and the Skaven slaves just turned around to hit me. I'm going to comment on something interesting about the new Bretonnian army that I found out as I've looked up rules these past few weeks, and that is that they have a unit now called the Hedge Knights, which is very similar to the peasant knights that they had before. I can't exactly remember what the unit was called. But one of the things is they have the skirmish special rule. Now they used to have Forest Strider as one of their special rules. I think the reason they took that away is, if I'm not mistaken, is you basically already have that if you're a skirmisher. But the other thing is they can become something called Hedge Knights. Now you'll notice that I've lost Vanguard on my Bretonnians, which, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. It sort of sucks, but so the Hedge Knights gain Vanguard back, plus they get the Scout ability. The Bretonnian army has never had Scouts, so I'm excited to mess around with that a little bit. Also, we have the peasant models are a little bit different, and now I've never really run peasants with the Bretonnians, so I'll really have to explore that a little bit more to understand if they're viable now. I imagine that they are, because this is a more balanced game. So the Bretonnians have become a lot less of the one-trick pony that they used to be. I'm excited about that. So now we'll dive into the Skaven turn, and the Skaven are about to do what they do best, which is kill, kill, kill. So I moved the Dread Mill forward, not to be confused with the Treadmill or the Doom Wheel. It's still closer to this unit. I tried to move it as far towards them as possible so I could unleash my lightning on them. But that's what I rolled for random movement. Now, random movement is very interesting. It's basically the same, except for some reason it says that you ignore dangerous terrain tests unless you charge. So apparently it can go through rivers without taking dangerous terrain tests unless I charge. Okay, so I just wheeled the Skaven around because they failed their leadership test to march. That should allow them to charge next round if we're lucky. But that does also put them far enough away from the dread wheel that they won't be shot by it. Now, the interesting thing about the full ranks rule, because I was looking that up, is the number, for instance, of full ranks of this model is actually 4, and of the slaves is 3, so it does count the front rank. But when you're taking a break, or where you're finding combat, when you're doing combat resolution, you count the first full rank after the first one. So it has 3 full ranks, which counts in when you do the leadership check because of their verminous valor or whatever, or strength in numbers, or whatever they've changed the new rule to. But the actual combat res is only 2 after. So that's different, new, interesting. Interesting magic phase. So the Winds of Magic were 8. The interesting thing about it, some of the changes in the rules. Well, first, I could really only cast 1 spell with my wizard because of the types of spells that are available. Out of the 3 spells, 2 of them were damage spells. It means I can't cast them into close combat, which is what's happening over here. The rest needed line of sight, which I don't have. I do have a very cool spell. I think it's called Test of the Heavens or some such thing, that allows us both my wizards to take a roll, and if my attacking wizard has more than that, by however much more, they take a wound, and I believe it's without any saves. So that would have been real cool, and doesn't matter if the enemy wizard is in a unit or not, or I can attack any part of the unit. It does have to be against a single model. If I would have had line of sight, I definitely would have cast that. So basically, I just had to throw as many dice as I could, and the rest of the dice are wasted because I can't really do anything. Now, I'm limited to 5 dice. That's new. You're usually limited to 6, and the other wizard could use as many dispel dice as, in this case, she wanted to. So she was able to easily, dispel my roll. Now, she rolled 2 6s. I don't know if you can see it there, but normally that would mean it doesn't matter how high I rolled, that it would automatically be dispelled. But in the 9th age, that's not the case. So couple of interesting rules. I think the magic phase may be a little bit more dumbed down. Magic might not be as powerful anymore, which again, like I spoke to in my last video, I'm not a huge fan of that yet, but we'll see how things go. So I rolled a die right there, and that happens to be what can misfire the tread wheel as well. Let me fix that. And so it's d6 times 2, so the strength is strength 6. It has lightning attacks, which basically just means it does extra damage to flying units, so that's interesting. And we'll determine how much damage it does to that scorpion. So I rolled for the dread mills shots. The toughness of the scorpion is only 4, which seems sort of weak to me. But so basically, strength 6 against 4, I was looking for 1s, and the Skaven did not get 1s. So 3 hits. I took 3 models off there to represent my hit points, and that's the end of Skaven shooting and magic phases. So I almost cheated there. I forgot that the Doom Wheel's hits actually do D3 damage, so it easily destroyed the Scorpion, and there it is on fire right now. So the slaves attack my Bretonnians, and just like they always do, duck. They wounded my paladin there. They didn't do any other damage, but they lucked and snuck through that hit. That always happens to me with slaves. They never do anything to my normal units, and they always wreck, for some reason, my characters. So that's what you get when you're dealing with slaves. Okay, so the Skaven have 1 rank. That's all they got for combat res. I have a banner of a rank, and I killed 5 of their guys. So obviously I win combat by, what is that, 7-6? Win combat by 6. They don't have steadfast, because in order to have steadfast you have to have more ranks, full ranks, than your enemy, and we have equal ranks. So here we go. See if those slaves explode. So the slaves were gone. They exploded, but apparently exploded no longer exists as a rule, so which I think is dumb. They need to bring back that rule. It added flavor to the Skaven, and the truth is it rarely ever took any wounds anyway, but I don't know why they got rid of that rule. That's dumb. But I did a combat pivot, is what it's called, where I can turn around on the center point of my unit. I guess a combat reform is slightly different, and then it's a true reform, so you can change your rank and file, and I don't need to do that, so they just call it a combat pivot. And I really probably didn't need to, but I did anyway, just because I don't want to risk any flank attack from those rats that no doubt will charge me. Or actually, I guess they can't. I guess I get to charge them, so I did my combat pivot, should be ready for a charge. That is the end of Skaven close combat, and we are now going to begin turn 2 with Bretonnian movement. So Bretonnian turn 2 movement phase, I declared a charge. I considered with the Ratmen actually fleeing as a charge reaction, because I have a long stretch of board there that I can flee across and try to save. However, I realized that might be a little dangerous for a couple reasons. One new thing in the 9th edition is that you actually get half the unit's points if the unit is fleeing. So if I never rallied, I might not go off the board, make it off the board, although we still have 5 turns left, so it's possible that I could. But I think that's cool. It's a long needed rule. Sometimes people will on purpose have a unit left over of like 1 or 2 units or 1 or 2 men or whatever 1 or 2 troops that are just going to flee forever, so you get no points for that unit, which is dumb. So now you get half the number, which is better than nothing. And so I was going to flee, but I decided not to, because the other thing about Skaven is they really need that leadership bubble, and if the leader is fleeing, then that's going to make it tough, because he can't use his leadership. So I decided to stand and hold, even though they're going to get wiped out by those Bretonnians most likely. They're not Skaven slaves, but they're still weak. So this might be a showdown with the Dread Mill at the end of this game. We'll see how it goes. And that's the end of the Bretonnians movement phase. So I changed my mind and actually marched my damsel out of her unit so that she can be in range, spell range during the Bretonnian magic phase to cast her flesh to stone, or whatever they call it now, on that unit over there. So, uneventful magic phase. I'm still not liking these new magic rules, to be honest. The damsel, she cast a pretty good cast with her. I put too many dice up there. Is that 5? No, that's 5. That's right. And the Skaven rolled really well. Plus, he's a higher wizard, so he was able to dispel it. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. But, you know, we'll wait till there's more wizards on the board and withhold judgment until then. So the Bretonnian crossbowmen, through their still need 5 up to hit. They have strength 4, and the Dreadmill has a toughness of 5. So, and plus it's got a 4-up armor save. So nothing got through. Nothing even got past its toughness. I'm going to call OP on the overpowered for the treadmill. You shouldn't be able to place that in this size of a battle. Okay, so Bretonnian close combat, they won. They didn't do a lot of damage on the rats. They did take out the general, because my general allocated basically all of his attacks against his general, which is sort of weird because his general didn't accept a challenge. He just happened to be in base contact. But that's how I understand the rules. So just have to be base contact and he can attack him. Yeah, so basically they lost combat by 3. They do have steadfast, so that was to their advantage, but they rolled an 8 on leadership, and since the general's dead, they can't use his leadership. So even with steadfast, we're probably going to overrun these. I'll roll and we'll see. So obviously the Skaven failed their pursuit test, and I overrun. I had to take 2 dangerous terrain tests because my knights on the end there were in dangerous terrain, but they both passed them. So we're fine, and maybe that tread or doom or whatever, the doom will isn't more overpowerful than I thought, because it's looking pretty good for the Bretonnians right now. And that will be the end of Bretonnian turn 2 and beginning of Skaven turn 2. Okay, so the doom wheel comes around and crashes into the Bretonnians. I think that's a very wise move. Now again, it has a very strange rule on the random movement, which said, according to how I read it, that it only takes dangerous terrain tests if it charges. So it did. It rolled four dice because the treadwheel is now considered a chariot, which it failed one of its dangerous terrain tests, took a wound, and of course with a 4-up armor save was able to save it because it's a armor piercing 6. And so it took a wound, but crunched into the Bretonnians there. I think that needs to be fact out. That whole dangerous terrain test thing seems a little weird to me. There's no magic phase because my wizard, who happened to be my general, is dead. During the shooting phase, I misfired, which was I rolled a 6, natural 6, but the treadmill, when it's in close combat, doesn't roll on the misfire chart. It just automatically gets a certain result, which is that it doesn't fire any shots, and it automatically takes a wound with no saves allowed. Not a good day for the Skaven, but a pretty normal day. So I guess that just contradicts itself. A normal day from the Skaven, which is a bad day. That's what I meant to say. So now we're going to head into close combat. So impact hits are a little interesting. They don't automatically at the beginning of combat happen necessarily. They just happen at initiative 10, which in most cases will mean that they happen first, but not necessarily. I guess you could have some models of... I don't know if there's a limit on attributes like there was in the old Warhammer. If there is, then 10 is the max you can get on attributes, which would mean it could go first. I guess you could tie for initiative. But the other interesting thing is that you have to choose between either using your impact hits or your grinding hits. Now, obviously, impact hits can only happen in the first round of a close combat, while grinding hits can happen in any round. But since the treadmill has D3 impact hits, or grinding hits, I went with that because it only has, from what I read, only has one impact hit, which seems strange. It says +1, which means, and it says the number within the brackets. Now, it's not in brackets, it's in parentheses. So I'm going to check the Army book real quick to just see if they made a mistake in a typo or something. But anyway, the grinding hits, I only rolled a D3, so I rolled a 2, so it's 1. So either way, I'm looking at one automatic hit at the strength of the treadmill, which I'll have to look up. Okay, so I looked it up, and because the treadmill, and I know it's dreadmill, but treadmill's better, especially if you're fighting Bretonnians against Skaven. I love the Skaven unless they're fighting against my Bretonnians. The treadmill is a chariot, and a chariot gets D6. So the +1 in parentheses, I don't know why it's talking about brackets, but whatever. In parentheses, it gets D6 normally, so I'm just going to go ahead and count that roll as my roll anyway, and I'm going to do my impact hits. So that's 2, +1 is 3, impact hits at its strength. Okay, so the end of the game. And we're only in the end of turn 2, beginning of turn 3. Basically, the Dreadmill's impact hits wiped out 3 of my guys. They didn't stand a chance. I was really scared about that, actually. Then the rest of the attacks just came up terrible. 2d6 rat attacks, which I think are the stronger strength now. I think they used to be at strength 2, or now it's strength 3. I think they rolled 4 attacks or something like that, and then they got a bunch of 1s. So nothing went through. And then you get to attack with the engineer on the back, and he didn't manage to pull anything off. I think that they did get some hits through, but I soaked with the armor. Then my champion basically just went to town with his +2 strength from his double-handed sword, or great weapon. Since they didn't charge this turn, they can't use their lances. And 3 attacks, just rolled real well. He had a higher weapon skill, so he was looking for 3 ups. Got them all. He was strength 8, so normally he's strength 4, +2 is 6. Strength 6. I don't know where I got 8 from. Against toughness 5, he managed to put it through all 3 attacks. He rolled really well, and basically that's strength 2. That's where I get the 8 from, because I'm thinking 3. He does, takes off 3 points of armor, so normally a 4-up armor save becomes 5 up, 6 up, and nothing. So he takes out the Doom Wheel, there's toughness 5, and it did, one of its damage it did to itself. Another was a dangerous terrain test that was failed, and then the champion took the other 3 wounds off, a total of 5 wounds. Blows up, boom, that's the end. If it hadn't have misfired, then I'm going to say that it would have probably taken out those 3 other knights, and it would have been game over and swung towards the Bretonnians. Although it still might have been close. I don't know, the archers might have been able to sneak some stuff through. Interesting game. I actually think that I do like the Doom Wheel, the Dreadmill, its ability to, at this small points of game, be there. I think it's pretty even. In general, I really like a lot of things. I like the fact that we're still playing, for the most part, very similar to Rolls to 8th edition. It's fun. It's a lot funner than some of the alternatives. I still don't like the magic phase. I'm gonna hold complete judgment still, because there are not a lot of wizards. There was only one high-level wizard. It was interesting with the Skaven to take that high-level wizard at this amount of points in the game. Usually you couldn't do that, and he was incredibly squishy, which is normal, but you'd think you'd get some kind of ward save. That's one of the things about 9th edition that's interesting, though, is that you don't get anything unless you pay for it, basically. So He could have had ward saves if we would have bought a bunch of expensive equipment to give him the ward saves, which would have pushed him over his limits. And so that's why, you know, I was able to take a wizard, because he was very squishy, didn't really have anything. So it allows for a lot more options. I'm worried it might take away from the flavor of the different armies, but I don't know. I think in the long term it'll just make for more strategic choices and a lot more fun. So in general, I really like the 9th Age. I'm going to play it. 8th edition goodbye, 9th Age hello. Hopefully I can get Duck and some of my other wargaming buddies back together to play it. Maybe get some tournament scenes going, or at least get some of the game stores to start playing this instead of the alternatives. And if you have any questions or complaints about things that I did wrong, please put them below in the comments. If you don't like this video, if you dislike it, that's fine, that's your choice, but I'd appreciate it if you tell me why so that I can make it better. Or if you do like it, please like it so I can get more likes. And that's the end.